I was regarded at Harvard Business School as being a communist.
Ken is fun, and Ken is a great friend to Barbie.
There's no empathy measure on most people's performance reviews. But if you don't have that, I think it's almost impossible to be an excellent marketer.
The brand manager is the general manager of the brand.
I was just this fat unit, you know what I mean, in a suit, and it was clear that I was not the same as the others.
Good morning, everybody. I'm saying good morning because we're here in Toronto at the Global Marketer Week, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Allyson Witherspoon. Thank you so much for joining me, Ungodly Hour. Allyson is Corporate Vice President and Global Chief Marketing Officer of the Nissan Motor Corporation. Been doing that, I think, for 5.5 years, and 10 years at Nissan and 20 years in the motor industry.
Yep.
So I couldn't possibly describe you as a veteran of the motor industry, but almost.
Almost, yeah. I'm not sure when the veteran status takes place, but yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for taking the time. Looking forward to seeing you on the main stage tomorrow.
Thank you.
Where I wanted to start was, as I was on my travels last year, had the great joy of being in Japan again.
Oh, nice.
And I was surprised at how few electric cars there were. And in fact, I was generally surprised how backward Japan was when it came to sustainable issues. So lots of plastic everywhere, as the rest of the world has shifted. But I know you have the fabulous Nissan Leaf.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about where you are on the electric car journey and how you see the global scene there? Because it's a fascinating one for all of us.
Yeah, and I think so too. And actually, I've lived in Japan for 3 years, and I think that I have a bit of a different experience with sustainability in that actually Japan is probably the most conscious of recycling of any country that I've seen in the world. And yes, there is a lot of plastic like a lot of places in the world, but there's also a very strict infrastructure on how to recycle, and everything is recycled. Even in our office at Nissan, there's a whole room that's for recycling, and it's recycling paper, the wrappers around the cups. So actually sustainability is quite built into the society. I think from an electric standpoint, Japan has been a little bit behind as far as EV adoption versus the rest of the world. What they have been very advanced in is actually kind of hybrid solutions. Yeah. At Nissan, we have e-Power, which it's not available in all parts of the world, but we're beginning to roll it out. And so actually Japan was quite early in those types of alternative fuels. Nissan actually was the first mass-produced electric vehicle with the Nissan Leaf. So we're not new to the EV game. I think the biggest thing is how do we keep on track with all of the trends that are happening when it comes to EV, but then also how quickly can we get to market with a lot of electric solutions?
Yeah, because I mean, the competitive scenario for a marketeer is a bit of a nightmare because you've got the Chinese going very fast, Tesla, of course, and price wars. So how do you cope with all of that? Because this isn't really a global marketplace, and that's interesting.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and I think especially with China kind of coming back after COVID, they've became very, very aggressive when it came to electric vehicles. So, and you're starting to see those Chinese vehicles being sold in different parts of the world, just, depending on what the regulation is. I would say that electrification, even before the Chinese brands started to really become aggressive, EVs were becoming more and more of what consumers were looking for. We were seeing that consumers are looking for alternative fuel sources. Some of that is based on regulation that you're seeing in different markets. But there's kind of a conscientiousness that consumers are wanting. How we're working to address it is rolling out, I think it's actually having the right powertrain solutions based on how consumers are going to be adopting those trends. So it's not one size fits all, it's very much market driven. And so the EV adoption that we're going to be rolling out at Nissan is very much going to be based on market by market. We're still going to be providing internal combustion engines, which is what we call ICE. But we're also going to be ICE.
ICE. You've got to have an acronym. Couldn't be marketing if you didn't have an acronym.
Yeah, right. Yes, of course. So we're going to have a lot of internal gas engines. We're also going to be offering a lot more of our e-Power, which is a series hybrid, which is kind of like the super hybrid, which is really, really exciting to drive. And then also a lot of new electric vehicles as well. But it needs to be based on consumer adoption instead of trying to force the issue, because ultimately consumers will drive the rate that it's going to be adopted, and then pricing becomes really, really important. I would say for us, because we've had, almost, over 15 years of experience in selling and servicing electric vehicles. We feel like we're positioned very well. We need to regain our leadership position, but we feel like we are set up for the future of electric and also that transition that we're going to see from consumers.
Fantastic. And I'm afraid I don't drive a Nissan. I was an early adopter of electric with a little BMW, and I have a hybrid Volvo, and I know you spent a lot of time with Volvo too.
I did, yes.
And what was interesting about that is the dual push of the support of regulation. And so, for instance, with a all-electric car, you don't pay congestion charge in London. You get help. And actually, I think that's this interesting mix of regulation and consumer pull that drives things.
Yeah, and I think what you're seeing, and there's been a lot of discussion in the news about it's slowing down, and I think regulation started to push it. I think ultimately, pricing for electric vehicles, it still is not at parity with gas engines, and so I think that's a little bit of what the challenges are for consumers. I also think that charging infrastructure is not probably where it needs to be for consumers to fully adopt. Yeah. It's improving, and it's improving rapidly, but it's when consumers are making a choice based on convenience, they're going to be thinking about, am I going to get stuck somewhere? Gas is very easy. They know what to do with that. Charging is still a little bit of an unknown. So I think infrastructure needs to be built up. I think there's a lot more that will happen. What we have been seeing is that consumers are excited about electric vehicles. And then I think it's just a matter of how do we kind of identify some of those pain points around charging infrastructure as well as cost.
You're a brand is it person. Brand comes before model and product range. So how does that work in Nissan? Because I agree, I totally agree with you. Yeah. But I can imagine you might have some internal discussions because you've got people developing things that they're very proud of. How have you got the brand internally to work as hard as you got it externally? Yeah,
and I think this was a big shift that we made kind of through our last midterm plan, which was called Nissan Next, and it was really about focusing on branded house and as kind of branding and marketeers. I think we understand what that means, but making sure that the Nissan brand is the halo, and then our product offering is what supports that. And actually, we've been working upstream in our product planning process to make sure that this is embedded, even when we're talking about vehicles at a concept phase. So this is still very much several years out. How are we embedding, how is that vehicle going to be delivering on our brand promise, which is innovation for excitement? So it's taken a lot of work, but we're working kind of function by function to make sure that this is how we're delivering. And I think it's been a very strong transformation for us, especially from where we've been over the last 10 years into where we're going. And I think especially because vehicles, there's so many choices now, especially with the China brands that are coming in, that consumers are really going to start to make choices based on brand. So it has to do with the product offering that's out there. It also has to do with how fragmented the media landscape is, and we need to be able to kind of insert ourselves into people's passion points, into what they're interested in, and brand does that, and the product serves the brand.
I love that. And how do you track, which metrics do you use? And again, what I'm really interested in here is what you talk about internally, so the metrics you share internally.
We look at overall opinion. That's kind of what our brand health is. I think it's very difficult to move in the automotive space, so we also look at what are the underlying metrics that reinforce our brand promise, innovation for excitement. So we look at fun, are we delivering on fun to drive, and are we delivering on innovation? The other metric that we're starting to look at is brand momentum, and that's really about, and kind of the point of it is, do people see you as a brand on the move? And I think that helps us to be able to position ourselves, especially when you're looking at, we know products that's going to be rolling out over the next several years. Are we able to generate that type of excitement about what we're doing? And do people see us as a brand that is on the move, ready to have products for consumers? So those are kind of some of the key metrics, but it's around brand health, the image attributes that support our brand promise, and then also this kind of forward-looking metric of brand momentum.
Well, and how are you measuring brand momentum?
It's actually survey-based, and we're looking at how we can, it's through GFK, through a partner that we work with on GFK. Yep. So it's survey-based for now, but I was just meeting with our market intelligence team, which manages this, and we're looking at how can we kind of enhance through a lot of social conversation that we're seeing, because obviously so much takes place digitally now. And so we're looking at how can we enhance with a lot of the digital ways that you can collect feedback. How can you support it through AI, machine learning, things like that? So I think we have the metric. It's still kind of survey-based, so we're looking at how do you enhance it with some more of the advanced tools that we have.
Fabulous, and you're teeing up every question so perfectly, it's not true. So let's talk a little bit about AI,
Yep.
and especially how you see that from a marketing perspective. And
Yep.
again, I think that's probably of different pace in different bits of the world. But on the metrics thing, I saw some work from, I shouldn't do them the favor of promoting their company, a company,
Okay.
where they really found the way to use software to pull in everything that's out there to feed back at you. Here's where your brand is, here's where the momentum is. And as they talk about, it's the death of surveys. Now, you would say that if you were selling. But there's that use. I guess your engineers are using AI,
Yes.
and they certainly will in wind tunnels and things. But what about from a marketing perspective?
From a marketing standpoint, the way that we're looking at it is as an accelerator. So I think we're looking at how do we get to insights faster? How can we get to kind of creative problem solving faster? Because I think that's where we see the biggest thing. I think there obviously are limitations to AI, and there's still a lot of unknown that's about it. We're starting to kind of dabble in how do you use it creatively, but we're not going kind of full in yet, because we still feel like you need that human touch. You need to create that emotional connection, which there are limitations when it comes to AI. So we're looking at using Gen AI more as an accelerator to get to insights, strategy, reinforce points, metrics. That's how we're looking to use it from a marketing standpoint.
And cheeky question, have you used it yourself to help you with speeches, that kind of thing?
I have actually. I have. I was trying to kind of understand what the opportunity was with it. And so I looked at it and I prompted it to be kind of like a strategic advisor for me. And so, I kept everything confidential. I didn't say what brand I worked for, things like that, but kind of set it up as I'm looking for a strategic advisor, automotive, I'm a global CMO. And it's fascinating. The thing that was the most surprising to me is that the questions that I would ask it, do we in-house versus outsource? And kind of how do I convince my finance team to invest more in the brand? Kind of typical questions that we as marketers and brand people that we encounter every day. The speed at the response is amazing. I also think that a lot of times it helps with the starting point of how do you create your argument. It's objective, and so it's not taking a position, and I think that that's where it's been really helpful to me. But that's how I started to look at it and really see what the opportunity was.
Yeah, because as with all tech, I think it's rubbish in, rubbish out. So
Yes.
I was doing a thing on the future of marketing, so I thought, write me a speech on the future of marketing. What came back was bleh.
Yeah.
When I fed in the 6 words I was going to use on a chart, what came back I then used as the summary chart.
Yeah.
So, I think it's powerful. I think it's exciting.
Yeah.
I don't find it threatening to the marketing
No.
industry, and I know we're going to touch on that theme tomorrow as well, which is why I'm kind of long-handing it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, and this is what I've kind of seen throughout my career, but like the fundamentals of marketing are always the same. It's just the tools start to enhance it. But you're 100% correct, because rubbish in, rubbish out, and we've seen it with briefs. You have to prompt things, you have to explain things to get the right output and the type of output that you're looking for. And it's how you work with agency partners, how you work internally, additionally. So I think that you take all of those principles and just apply it, and now we have a tool that gets to those responses a lot faster.
Yeah, and let's talk in this context a little bit about agency partners. When we had the WFA Congress in Japan, had the great privilege of doing the cocktail event, I think, in your research centre. Fantastic.
Yes.
And at the time, your CMO was also Council Member Alda Rees.
Yes.
And he was talking about how Omnicom were used all over the world in a kind of one-stop shop,
Yep.
but shaped to your needs. Are you still in that phase?
Yes, we're still in a Nissan United phase. I think what we've learned from that process is that we operate in so many markets in the world. We are a big global brand. This was a way for us to have consistency back to the brand. We needed that consistency with the brand. How it comes to life needs to be localized within each of the markets. And we felt that the Omnicom solution, and also collapsing media and creativity, because they both work hand in hand, we found a lot of effectiveness that has come out of that model, and a lot of efficiency as well.
Well, presumably lots of high-speed learning around
Yes.
the world, which is good.
Yeah, and I think, and when we implemented it, we took a very deliberate approach when it comes to change management. So we brought in a lot of change management principles to make sure that we were getting it set up correctly, that we were having the right types of buy-ins from all the key stakeholders. And so I think I'm excited with how we were able to roll it out. And I worked for Rule at the time and was responsible for actually putting it together. But then also it's just about how do you optimize it? And we've learned a lot over the last few years. And so it's been we've had this ability kind of to continuously optimize it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can I say chapeau, because it's wonderful to hear of a client betting on a long-term relationship
Yes.
and shaping it. Because I think that's when you get the best people, you get the best work, because
Yeah.
it's based on the human respect thing, which I think is great.
And I think, and we're invested in mutual success. Omnicom is very much in line with what we're looking to do as a business. They're our biggest supporters, our biggest kind of cheerleaders, and I think it is really important to have those types of strategic partners.
Yeah. Now, listen, the one thing I didn't do when I was prepping, and you'll forgive me, because I think you're the first person I've ever met that's made a 4-hour ad. And a 4-hour ad on YouTube.
Yes.
And I think that was also based on, I love the thing you talk about where you want to go where the attention is to get a dialogue.
Yeah.
But how has that been? I mean, a 4-hour ad, what feedback did you get internally? How has it worked for you? Again, metrics.
Yeah.
Tell us all about that.
Yeah, I think it started, what we found is, and we found through research and insight, and we partnered with Google on it actually, we found that people that engage in the Lo-Fi Girl channel on YouTube, that they were almost 3 times more likely to consider electric vehicles. So we thought this is an interesting place to be able to introduce, the all-new Nissan Ariya at the time, which was our new electric SUV. And so we looked at that and we looked at kind of what the Lo-Fi Girl, channel was and the type of content. And so then we created this ad, and the 4 hours is actually roughly the range of what the battery is. And so that's how long you can go on a single charge in the Nissan Ariya. And we were, and it was deliberate. It wasn't just kind of happenstance. And then we worked with music producers to create tracks that go along with it. And we had kind of Easter eggs that we put throughout the entire, that were kind of cues to Nissan. We had kind of billboards, Godzilla shows up. We had some cues to some of our heritage models that are in it. And so there's just a lot of these Easter eggs. And what we found is that people were watching, millions of hours of people watching it. And people would watch the whole thing and just kind of became this music channel that they were engaging in. And I remember when we first launched it, I started to see that it was picking up steam. And so I did the thing where you open it up and you cringe and you start to look at the comments and you're like, please let it be okay and not the trolls. And I went in there and everyone was like, I didn't realize this was an ad. This is the most interesting thing I've seen. I can't believe this is actually advertising. And I thought that maybe we were seeding the comments because it was almost universally positive, and it wasn't us. It was actually just what consumers were doing. And I think the interesting thing was that it was advertising that wasn't advertising, which is what consumers like. And we were able to insert ourselves into something that people were interested in, and we were able to bring the brand forward to them and let them discover us, where they want to be.
Yeah, I think that keeping a brand culturally relevant and I think that is a content-driven thing. I must revise something I said probably about 15 years ago, so I can forgive myself. I thought brand content was the great red herring of the time.
Yeah.
And I now revise and go, actually, brand content, when it's well done, is a remarkable way to drive engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And I think it was, obviously it's a risk, but it came from an insight. And so we took the risk to say, like, this is where we think that EV considerers are going to be. Now, how do we do it in a way that's going to be, that will be relevant and impactful for them? Not us pushing, here are the 10 things about the car that we want you to know, but it's more about, this is the Nissan Ariya, and we want to introduce you to it, and we're going to do it in a fun and engaging way. And we learned a lot from that.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm going to look at it, I promise, and I'll put some nice feedback on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And then I think the other thing I'd love to hear you expand is I liked your description of 2024, which you described as a year of tiptoeing and intentional decision making.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use 2 words I hate now. Can we pivot to unpack that?
Yes, the pivot. I think we've all gotten very used to the pivot kind of starting in COVID. to me, I think the biggest thing is there are a lot of economic questions in consumers' minds. So I think consumer confidence and their spending, it's a little bit, they're still a little bit measured. We also have elections in different parts of the world, which also creates kind of some of this dynamic, which is why I referred to it as a tiptoe. But it really has to do with consumer confidence and their ability to spend. You know, buying a car is the second most considered purchase. And so I think consumers, especially if they're a little bit skeptical about the economy, they're going to question their big buying decisions.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it is. And I think the intentional decision making actually comes out of, we have learned so much with COVID, and how do we use that as an opportunity to really start to build the brand. And what can you do when you can't sell cars? Because dealerships were closed in most parts of the world, and so we really kind of leaned into brand building. But then also on the heels of that, we had the supply chain shortage, which completely crippled the automotive industry. And through that, I think we learned a lot in how do we invest, how do we focus on the brand, and I think all of those learnings that we had are going to continue to carry forward, and that's why. I don't think that there was, excessive spending that has been done. I think, cars are, there's a big competitive set. It's very dynamic. I don't think that it's excessive, but I would say that we're much more intentional about who we're reaching out to, how we're communicating them. And also some of that is based on the media landscape. And so that's why it's the economic uncertainty is the tiptoeing part of it. And the intentional decision making is taking the learnings that we've had over the last few years and how do we invest, how do we talk about the brand, how do we try to promote our products in an environment where people are skeptical and the environment and the competitive environment is massive.
So Allyson, tomorrow you're on the main stage. What are the takeouts going to be?
I think there's been so much discussion about data and the usage of data, generative AI, and the conversation will be about all of these tools and how do we reach consumers in a fragmented way. But the most important piece of it is around creativity. And at the end of the day, creativity is actually what will be impactful for consumers and how they'll perceive your brand. So data is in service of creativity.
Oh, love it. Perfect. And can you perhaps help me with the thing I'm doing tomorrow? We're going to be talking about whether CMO is becoming an impossible job.
I love that this is one of the conversations.
Yeah. So, for instance, listening to you, you look like you're loving what you do. Doesn't look like an impossible job in the slightest to me. But what would you say to that theme?
I would say it is. I would say there's more pressure on CMOs than there's ever been in the past.
Yep.
And I would say the CMOs are a different breed than what we've ever seen before. I think we have to be much more kind of business-oriented, finance-oriented, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a very good thing. I think, I as a professional marketer, it was always frustrating that you would hear, marketing is just event planning, things like that, and that was such an outdated perception. And now it's really about us being the business and the strategic advisor. And I think that's what makes it impossible, because some of what we do is not this, apples to apples comparison or the direct ROI of, each dollar that's spent here results in this on this date. And so I think that there's, we're a different breed than some of our colleagues in other functions, and there needs to be a lot more understanding, but we really have to be that strategic advisor.
Yeah, but I think increasingly the kind of glue of the C-suite as well, because you bring the customer insight to the table as well as the product insight and the brand, and brand is reputation and so on.
Yeah, and the culture piece of it, and I would say that's internal and external culture.
Yeah, but I do remember in one of my agency phases, I went into the Ford Motor Company, and then I'd gone into the wrong building. And I said, I'm sorry, I've come to see the marketing department. Where are they? And I was in the procurement building, and the guy said, you mean the colouring in people? They're over there. So yes, the world has moved on dramatically.
The world has moved on, and I think it's, some of it is that it's, anyone can be a creator now, and so I think it's, we have different consumers. They have different needs. They have different wants. We reach them differently. And so I think it's, to me, and throughout my career, it's been, how do I partner with my peers? How do I partner with our CFO? All those things, how do I partner with them? Because we have so many insights. We have a lot of data, and we can help drive the business. And so it's really been about just inserting myself into those conversations. It's difficult, And it is impossible because there's so much pressure that's on us, mainly because of the spend, and everybody wants the business to grow, but it's exciting.
Fantastic. And listen, that's a good note for us to end, but always like to end with your thoughts on what every CMO should have on the top of their agenda.
Consumer insights. To me, it's all about consumer insights. Really understanding what they're looking for, where you can meet them, and how you can have the most impactful conversation with them.
Well, listen, fantastic, and a very impactful early morning conversation.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for paying attention. Look forward to seeing you again very soon. I think we've got our next one coming just a month away. Take care. Bye.